Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner, and my special guest today is author Rosie Andrews. How are you, Rosie?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, thanks so much for joining me. So when I was reading up about your background, I read. Is this true that you're the third of like 12 children?
Yeah. Everyone loves that one. Yes,
Yeah,
and
of
we
course.
have one boy and 11 girls.
Amazing.
Mm,
And wow, that's so. And you grew up in Liverpool, of course, with inside that massive family.
we did. I mean, even for Liverpool at that time, where probably bigger families because of the Catholic
Of
background
course, yeah,
were a
yeah.
bit more common, it was still very, very weird. And it was the thing that everybody just wanted to hear about. What was it like growing up in a big family? And I suppose it's hard to really discern the difference when you're the one in the family, isn't it?
Yeah,
And you think it
yeah.
must just be the same as everybody else, but I don't think that it is.
I know it's fascinating. My family are from Liverpool. I grew up in Merseyside, and both of my grandmothers came from very, very large families. But
Mm.
nonetheless, by the time it got to us, all the grandchildren, it's much smaller units. So growing up when you did, 12, 12 strong families are quite rare these days, I think.
They are. Now we actually had a family living around the corner who had 13. So
Wow.
we were like, oh, we're normal.
Yeah. That is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Now, we're here, of course, to talk about your new novel, The Leviathan, which people watching this interview can buy from the links attached to a conversation. Right there, with its incredibly beautiful cover, published by Raven Books. What can you tell me about the book?
Mhm. So I love historical fiction.
Yeah.
It's one of my older loves, and
And
history.
sorry to interrupt you. You
No
studied
problem.
history, didn't you?
I did,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You said.
Um, so I studied history and then I became an English teacher. So one of the things that I absolutely love that brings those things together is the whole genre of historical fiction and with a little bit of fantasy. And that's how I see the Leviathan. It's a 17th century mystery, which centers on a man or a young man who in the middle of the Civil War goes home to his family, and his sister has accused a local servant who lives with his father of witchcraft and of improper conduct with the father. And then his job and his involvement sort of accelerates in that situation until he's facing something that's a lot more frightening even than witchcraft.
Wow. And your protagonist, what side of the conflict is he on?
In his heart, he doesn't really care one way or the other, but in his fighting, he is on the parliamentarian side.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, that's such a rich piece of English history to explore. What was your inspiration for the confluence of your historical themes, but everything else that surrounds the novel and makes it what it is?
Yeah. Without giving too much away about the central point,
Yeah.
I think that the inspiration for me was that at that time, one of the major conflicts was all to do with how much disorder, how much chaos could people face before they were happy to give over their rights, if you like, that they were just starting to understand, to a sovereign ruler. So it was that sort of conflict between order and chaos. And the novel shares a title with, or nearly with, Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan, which is
Yeah.
obviously a work from a little bit further on, which focuses on that question of sovereignty and who should rule us and how much order we need. And they were the themes that underpinned what I was writing.
Yeah, wonderful. And was this a story that had lived with you for a long period of time? Is it something that
Mm.
came together quickly?
It came together very quickly. So I started writing the novel in about, as far as I can remember, um, do you know what, time sort of passes really weirdly when you're publishing a novel. I
Yeah,
think it was 2019 that I started
yeah,
writing, and 2020, about 9 or 10 months later, that I was ready to submit it. So it did come together really fast. But one of the So some of the themes and things that are in the novel are things that have fascinated me for a much longer period of time. So some of the sort of Nordic mythology that you might find below the surface of the book, some of the ideas about what we call cryptozoology, so what sort of creatures are possible, have always fascinated me. I've always loved the sea. So all of those things are present, and they kind of came together in a quite fortuitous way.
Wow, and of course you've had some wonderful support from people like Anita Frank, Jennifer Saint, saying just wonderful things about your debut novel, which this is. That must feel amazing.
It's absolutely amazing, and one of the most lovely things I think that debut authors and me in particular find is that how supportive the book community is. I've never really expected people to read it, let alone say wonderful things about it. So, yes, I'm really delighted.
Yeah, and I'm very pleased for you. And again, the edition that Raven have produced, it's just so beautifully designed. Do you know who it was who's responsible for the design of the cover?
I do, yes. So there's a wonderful creative director at Bloomsbury called David Mann, who's responsible for it. And when I first saw it, it just hits you, doesn't it? I think it's such a wonderful cover. And yeah, I'm thrilled.
Fantastic. And what was your process when you were writing the novel? How did your writing day look?
Yeah, this is the dreaded question. I'm never sure. I always feel like it wrote itself. Like I sort of have moments where I wake up sometimes and something happened in, not quite in a dream, but in that half moment before you're like really awake, and the next plot point has come upon you. So when it comes to a process for writing, I mean, I like to think of a character, a person, and a need that they might have, and then see where that takes you in terms of you need for the reader a form of a journey. You need something that's exciting and eventful, but at the same time, I like to have an endpoint in mind as well. I like to know what the ultimate conflict is and what needs to happen. And then from there, it's a case of putting together scene by scene how you think that should look.
Yeah. Did you ever find, for you, does the environment come first, or is it the characters that come to you first? How do you feel about that?
I think it's a combination. I'm very place-led, so I love things. I love old places. I love places that have a lot of history attached to them. So once I have a scene and a kind of environment in mind, that helps me when it comes to character and theme and how someone will behave in that place, and what the social realities are of the place and the time. A lot of that, so they feed into each other for me.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. And what are you working on next, Rosie?
So I'm working on a novel that has a working title of The Puzzle Wood.
Yeah.
Which is I love Gothic literature generally.
Yeah.
So although the Leviathan has some Gothic tones to it, it's not set in the 19th century in that great age of Gothic fiction. But this one is. So this one is set in the borderlands, if you like, between England and Wales. So the Welsh Marches, and it surrounds a woman who is investigating something that is said to have happened to her sister that she doesn't believe is the case.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. So when's that going to come? Do you think? When are we going to see that on? Next year?
Always a good question. When it's quite finished, I will know, but I don't know at the moment.
Are you mostly finished at the moment? Are you mostly on the? Yeah. That's. But of course, you've got to enjoy the success of the Leviathan first, and I know that it is going to be successful. And again, for everybody watching, it's this beautiful narrative, really. The Leviathan, it's available from the links attached to our conversation. And before we go, Rosie, have you got any other touchstones, entertainment wise, whether it's novels or movies or anything that are set within this era that you've enjoyed yourself?
I have. I mean, there are quite a few good novels surrounding the witchcraft theme, which I've just written a blog around that. So novels by Beth Underdown, for example, and Stacey Hall's The Familiars and the Witchfinder's Sister, the other way around, sorry. And I've really enjoyed those novels. And then I used to be, and maybe I wouldn't say I'm not a fan anymore, but I haven't read as much recently, a fan of Philippa Gregory's novels that were set in the early modern period, moving into the Stuart period. They're really good for the historical detail. Similarly, books by C.J. Sansom, the whole series of around the dissolution of the monasteries, which is obviously a bit earlier, but I really, really loved. And then because I did study this period quite a lot, some of the non-fiction stuff is really interesting, the pamphlets that they used to produce in that period of time when they were just coming into the written word. And I found all of that wonderfully illustrative. It helps you to understand the way they talked and the way they thought. So yeah, there's loads of good stuff around that.
So I find that fascinating, actually. So would you, if there was a layperson who really wanted to dig into this part of British history, I studied history as part of my degree. Also, I did an English degree with a history minor, but I've never ever studied this part of history. I've read about it, watched movies or whatnot. But if there was if a layperson was coming in and wanted to find a book, a non-fiction book that's going to introduce them to this era, which books or authors would you really recommend?
So there's Malcolm Gaskell's books were really useful to me, particularly on witchcraft. So I would recommend looking at that. There was a really seminal, I can't remember the author, but an overview of the English Civil War, which I found really useful. And I think her name was Deborah. No, it's escaped me. But that was excellent. And then I would think of reading the Time Traveler's Guides. They're really good. So To Stuart History is brilliant. That helps you to understand some of the more vernacular stuff, what they ate, how they talked, what they wore, without it being boring, which is nice.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, thank you very much. And finally, have you ever seen Witchfinder General, the Vincent Price movie?
No, is it good?
Yeah, it's a piece of schlock Vincent Price, but it's gloriously high camp, I would say. So
when was it made?
I would totally recommend it. Right at the end of the 60s.
Oh, brilliant.
I think it was maybe an Avco Embassy film. It's from that period. It's after he's done all his Gothic horrors, but it's towards the end of the 60s. So it's more permissive in terms of what you see. But he's really tuned the scenery in it. So I totally recommend it, particularly for you, I think it'd be highly amusing given your knowledge of the period.
I will look that up.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know this book is going to do tremendously well. I think we did a great job talking about your book without actually spoiling any of it and avoiding some of the central concepts, which I know people who read this are going to go on a great journey and find fascinating. So
thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me, Rosie.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Take care and all the very best of luck with the Leviathan. Luck you don't need, because it's a great book.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Cheers. Bye-bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.